What's going on, everybody? Pineda here. In today's video, we are going to be talking about why cash flow should not be the only thing you're looking at when you're buying rental properties. So the first time that I ever really understood cash flow was when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was back in around 2014. I remember I was substitute teaching and I had read that book for the very first time. I hadn't started couch flipping yet. I also hadn't started flipping houses yet. And just the idea of cash flow made perfect sense. If you can create more passive income than your expenses, you're theoretically financially free. You shouldn't have to ever work a day in your life. And I think a lot of people who read Rich Dad, Poor Dad come to that conclusion. They say, you know what? I need to become financially free. I need to get rental properties so that I can have enough cash flow to support my lifestyle. And so a lot of people kind of figure out that financial freedom number. Some of them might be $5,000, $6,000, whatever it is. And their goal is to just acquire as many rentals as possible, as fast as possible, so they can be financially free. Now, when I got into house flipping in 2015, I honestly had no ambition to buy a rental property. For me, it was far better to flip every single property and build up cash because I didn't have any cash. If I were to take, say, $20,000 and put it in a rental property, that's not good for me because now that $20,000 is stuck, and I'm pretty much gonna have to figure out how to make another $20,000 doing something else. And so I realized early on that I would much rather flip the houses, make the 20 grand, plus get my initial investment back, and just keep compounding that money over and over again. And that's exactly what I did. I did not buy any rental properties for the first probably 50 flips I did. I was strictly just reinvesting every single dollar I had into the next flip. And I was starting to grow my wealth really quick doing it that way because I was making $20,000 a flip, $25,000 a flip. And by then you do 50 flips and you've made over $1 million in profit. And it was definitely the right decision because had I just invested that money into a rental, it would have been sitting there. And then maybe I could have saved up some money doing something else. Then I buy another rental. And maybe in those 3 years, I might have had 3 rentals. But I would much rather be in the position that I was in after 3 years where I had flipped over 80 homes and I was in a great financial position. And I actually had $1 million net worth after year 3 with all the cash I had and all the equity in the flips that I had ongoing. And so I know for a fact in 3 years, I wouldn't have got to where I was at if I just tried to buy rentals from the beginning. And that's actually the same philosophy I teach my students now because it's what worked for me. Start flipping and wholesaling first, build up your capital, learn to get deals, learn to fix up homes. Then once you have enough capital, start buying some rentals and cherry picking the ones that you're finding. It's exactly the same method I did. And I actually did a YouTube video about my full rental portfolio. I'll link to it in the link below so you guys can see it. So I'm not here to say that rentals are bad. In fact, rentals are really good for tax reasons, for depreciation, for write-offs, and all these other benefits along with cash flow and appreciation. But too many people only think about the cash flow. And that's why I want to open your eyes to something different. And I actually see this on Bigger Pockets a lot. Many people want to invest in the Midwest because they have great cash flow. You could go buy a house for $50,000. It'll go rent for $800 to $1,000. It hits what we call the 2% rule, and it's great cash flow on paper. Now here's all I can say. I have bought rental properties in all of these weird places with cheap houses. I bought a duplex in Saginaw, Michigan. I bought a property in Indiana. The best deal I bought was a $12,000 triplex in Pennsylvania. I put $12,000 into it, so I was into it for $24,000 total, and it rented for $1,200. And a lot of you watching this are like, wow, that's the best deal ever. Did you keep it? And the answer is no. I've sold every single cheap rental that I've owned in these random places. And I held those rentals for years, but after just experiencing it and seeing what the real cash flow was and what the headaches were, I just decided it wasn't worth it anymore, and I sold them all. And the funny thing was, selling them a couple years later in a market that was appreciating and really hot, guess what? I ended up getting the same amount that I bought them for. I thought I was getting these crazy deals and I ended up selling them for pretty much the same exact price that I was into them for. And so that brings me to why I don't like these cheap markets. For number one, a lot of the tenants you're dealing with in these cheap homes naturally are more of a headache. And this is not to start a debate about rich versus poor or anything like that. It just is what it is when you're dealing with those types of properties. We had significantly less people paying rent. They did not upkeep the property as well. And it just was a nightmare for me. I didn't want to deal with it. Another reason I didn't like them is that one repair can wipe you out for your cash flow in those properties. And in fact, one repair might cost more than the entire house cost you. Take for instance, that house I bought for $12,000. If it needs a new roof, that's costing at least half of that. If it needs an AC, if it needs a furnace, if it needs all this stuff, it's gonna cost pretty much what the house cost. And I've got no problem putting money into a house when it's gonna raise the value. But here's the thing, it doesn't raise the value in those areas. You could put all the nicest things and it is still gonna be worth almost nothing. And that brings me to my last point about appreciation. In those areas, you are not gonna get any appreciation. That just is what it is. That's the trade-off with the cash flow. If a house was selling for $25,000 today, what do you think it was selling for back in 2009, 2010 after the recession? I'll give you a hint, it was pretty much the same price. It's not like it could change. It's not like they could just sell it to you for free. Actually, I take that back. There are houses in Detroit that you can get for $1. I've seen it. They literally will give you the house so that you can just start paying property taxes and rehab the neighborhood. But definitely, I would not buy one of those dollar houses for sure. And so those are a lot of the reasons I don't like these cash flow markets. What I do like are the appreciation markets. And the appreciation markets are really where you're gonna build net worth. Think about this, if you bought a home in California 30 years ago, you're probably a millionaire at this point if you didn't refinance and you just paid off your loan. And you probably bought that house for $100,000, $200,000, and it's worth over $1 million easily. But once again, you buy this same home in Memphis or Ohio or something like that 30 years ago. Okay, you bought it for $10,000 and today it's worth $40,000. So for me, if I'm gonna accumulate a lot of rental properties, I'm in it for the long haul. I don't wanna sell these things. So I want something that's gonna make me super rich down the road. But on top of that, a lot of these properties that we're buying now for rentals are making me richer today as well. They're increasing my net worth by a lot more. A typical property I buy is 80% of market value. So if I got a property that's worth $300,000, I'm probably into it for $240,000. That gives me a $60,000 boost in my net worth. And guess what? In 10 years from now, what's that $300,000 property gonna be worth? Well, I'll tell you, in Vegas, the last 10 years, property values have at least doubled. Now, would we expect that again? Probably not, but you just never know with how much money the government's printing. $300,000 house might be worth $500,000 in 10 years. And think about if you get 10 of those in the next 5 years. Well, now you got 10 properties that have essentially doubled in value. You've become at least a millionaire, probably a multimillionaire in 5 years. So I would much rather invest in a market that's gonna appreciate. So let's take, for example, the $300,000 home in Las Vegas. Right now, it would probably rent for $1,800 to $2,000 a month. Now, depending on what kind of financing you get, you're probably not gonna cash flow. At best case, you might break even. But I can tell you, I would still rather take that rental than the one that's in the Midwest that maybe makes me $200-300 a month. And here's the reason, in 30 years from now, what's that $300,000 property worth? It's probably worth at least $600,000. You're gonna make some great cash flow once that thing is paid off, and then it's renting for $4,000, $5,000 a month. On the other hand, what's that $50,000 property worth? At best case scenario, maybe $100,000 in 30 years. Maybe the rent went up to $1,500, I don't know. But my philosophy is this: while I am young and I am making great active income, I don't need to get the cash flow. I don't need to be financially free at this point. I would much rather stack my balance sheet, increase my net worth, and then take the cash flow later on. And it's not like I'm not gonna have cash flow forever. It will cash flow in time. And that's just a typical example in Vegas where cash flow isn't that good. But there are a lot of markets where you can get some appreciation and some cash flow. That's one of the reasons I really like Tucson. You could go get a house in Tucson for $200,000 all in, and it'll rent for $1,500-1,600. That will get you great cash flow, and I expect that market to appreciate. The other way to get both cash flow and appreciation is through Airbnb. So I've talked about my Airbnbs in Big Bear, California a lot. And in just the 2 to 3 years that I've owned them, they have appreciated like crazy. And during that time, I was Airbnb-ing it and making a lot of cash flow. So if you can find a market that has appreciation plus really good Airbnb returns, you've kind of hit the golden goose. Like, that's where you want to be. And that's why I continue to buy properties in Big Bear, because it's one of the markets that I've identified that's close to me and kind of can hit both of those things that Vegas can't. Unfortunately, Vegas has very strict restrictions against Airbnb, or else I'd be all over it. And so, in conclusion, my whole point about this is that you should not only focus on cash flow. If you can, think about how can I increase my balance sheet? How can I increase my net worth? Those things, to me anyways, are much more important. It's not like I want to retire today anyway. I want to work. I want to make money while I'm young. It's easier to make money for me now while I'm strong, I'm healthy, versus when I'm old and I can't really do it anymore. And maybe I'll be making a lot more money when I'm old. Who knows? But for most people, the majority of your income is going to be coming when you're younger. And the other thing I failed to mention is that you get so many more tax benefits with expensive property. You're going to get more interest deductions, you're going to get more depreciation. And so even though you might not be cash flowing in real life where you're actually making money, you're going to end up making money from tax savings. And essentially, what's the difference, right? If I save $300 a month in taxes from owning this rental, that's no different than having cash flow of $300 on a different property. It's kind of crazy, but in business, people don't realize that saving $300 is the same as making $300. The net is the same to your bottom line. So you got to look at both sides of it. And for me, when I look at both sides, it makes much more sense to go for appreciation in my situation. Now look, if you live in the Midwest and you want to buy these properties, I don't have a problem with it. I have a lot of my students who buy these properties. But here's the deal. They understand their market better than I do. They're local. They know that they're getting a good deal. Maybe they know some pockets of the neighborhoods that may appreciate better. And that's totally fine. I support them in buying those properties. But I'm not a fan of it when guys like me from Vegas or California try and buy in the Midwest. It kind of can end up not being what you expected. I personally experienced that. And real quick, shameless plug, since I'm talking about my students and coaching program, if you want to apply for it, definitely click the link below, go to futureflipper.com. You can get coached personally by me. And we go over all this stuff that I talked about in this video, so definitely check it out. And if you did get value out of this, make sure you hit the like button. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed. Go follow me on all the socials. Until next time, peace.